we will follow.
Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. We are really excited this week. We're calling this week Premiere Week. No, it's not the premiere of Trinity Talk Live. This season 2 actually started back in June. But we have 3 new shows, all premiering this week. We've got In the World, our current event show, starting Wednesday at noon. We have Pocket-Sized Apologetics, our 2-minute or less apologetic program. That goes up Friday at 9 a.m. And we have our very first animated show, Jake and Gracie, premiering Saturday morning at 7 a.m. And in case you're wondering, Ken, why are you talking so fast? Normally you take a lot longer to explain this kind of stuff, because we're also trying to make this show shorter, so I'm going to talk less. So first of all, I will turn things over here to our 2 guests. I will ask them to briefly introduce themselves, say who they are, something fun about yourself, and then I will tell everybody what we're doing here. We got something kind of unique we're starting here with this episode. So who are you?
My name is Ben Lander, and if you've seen the show, more than 5 times, you've probably seen me. So I'm the pastoral assistant here and working on my punctuality.
I'm not saying Ben forgot today's taping, but we're starting half hour late for some undisclosed reason. We'll just leave it at that. So, and who is this lovely lady down here in the end?
My name is Mary Lou Roberts, and I'm an associate in ministry, and I've been in ministry here for 23 years.
Thank you very much. This is Mary Lou's second, right? I didn't forget one. Second time on the show, but she goes back to like in the single digits of season 1 when we were still upstairs in Heritage Hall. The lighting was horrible, and so we've come a long way, hopefully, since then. Okay, so let me explain a little bit what we're doing here today. This is a little bit something unique. I do have a boss. His name is Pastor Jay, one of many, actually. And in one of our recent meetings, Pastor Jay and I sat down talking about a new venture, a new priority we're trying to do here at Trinity, not just through Trinity Talk Live, but Trinity Talk Live is one of the ways we're going to be utilizing it or implementing it. We here at Trinity, the way we operate is we have a number of ministry teams. We have a lot of people who serve on different, I don't know if you want to call them committees. I think team is a better word because we really do kind of work as a team. In order to help organize and implement the various different ministry projects that we have going on. And so what we're going to do is for each month, one of the shows every single month for the next 12 months, we are going to invite members of each of our different ministry teams onto the show to talk a little bit about what we do on that team. And so it can be, first of all, it's going to serve 2 purposes. Number one, for those of you that are watching the show that do attend church here at Trinity, it's going to let you know who your teams are and what we do. But also, even for those that don't, it's going to talk a little bit about how to implement certain types of ministry, even at your home church that you could do. Or if you're looking for a home church, hey, come on over here to Joplin, Maryland. If you're in California, it's just a plane right away. So what we're starting out with this month is our evangelism team. We have, or more fully, I guess, our PR/evangelism team, public relations and evangelism. We lump them all together. So we, both Mary Lou and Ben and myself, for that matter, this ministry actually falls under evangelism as well. We're gonna talk a little bit about evangelism, and the way I want to start out, first of all, is ask both of you. We can chime up because Mary Lou, you've been to seminary too, right?
Yes.
That is awesome. You see, so I'm expecting you to out-theologize, theologize. I don't know if that's a word either, Ben. But let's start generally. And I want to, because I did an episode of Trinity Talk Devotions a few months ago, where I call it like the E word. And what that was about was I was talking about this word evangelism or evangelical. Like we even have the name of our church is Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church. And I talked about how that's kind of almost become a bad word in a lot of circles. People don't want to say it. They don't want to say they are an evangelical Christian. Let me show my hand. I am an evangelical Christian. I got no problem saying that.
Absolutely.
But I want to clear up the misconception. A lot of people don't know what that word means. They think it's almost like a political term. And so I want to talk first about what is evangelism, biblically speaking, and what does it mean? So since Ben was late and probably didn't even remember what the topic was before he walked in 2 seconds ago, Mary Lou, I'm going to ask you first for your thoughts about when you hear the word evangelism, what does that make you think of? What do you think biblically that means?
Well, I think of Matthew 28, which is where the Great Commission is. And Jesus told us what he expected of all of us to do. and that's to spread the gospel. But in his words, he said, I want you to go to all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And like I said, basically that means spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's what evangelism is.
And that's great. It's a very general, and that's kind of why I want to start out this way. And I'll give you your chance in a second. I know you're chomping at the bit. But because I think what we'll see as we go through the show, hopefully, is okay. That's what evangelism means. Now, how do we go about doing that? And there's different ways that we here at Trinity go about doing that. Some of which people may not have thought of. So, Ben, what do you think of when you hear the word evangelism?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of maybe evangelism as this political term. It kind of has been watered down, especially in America. But it's a biblical term. It comes from the Greek word evangelion, which the Greek, it just means good news, which is what we share. We share the gospel. Gospel is good news. So when we evangelize, the Greek, you're spreading the good news. That's what evangelism, when you talked about, our church name is Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church. A lot of people come up and they ask, well, why you're a Lutheran church, but you're evangelical? You guys are kind of, people have called us Lutheran Light, because we have the traditional service, but we kind of, mix it up with some contemporary things. And what we always try to tell people is that evangelical is placed even before the Lutheran part in our title, because the gospel has to take primacy. It's always, we put the gospel first. We're always, before our traditions. Pastor Jay just did a great message about that. It's, putting our traditions aside and really focusing on what is the core of Christianity, and that has to be the Great Commission. Matthew 28:19. Go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them, all that I've commanded you. So, yeah, to evangelize just means to share the good news, and there's a lot of different ways we can do that, and we can get into that. But really, the best way is just talk about it. Talk about what God has done for you.
And as a matter of fact, let me say it before I forget. Next week's episode is going to be Ben's going to be back on. He and I are going to be talking about just that. The best thing is how to talk to people. Well, that terrifies a lot of people. So we're kind of giving some general advice here, but then come back next week when we're going to give some practical advice about how to go about doing that, how to actually talk to people about your faith. So we're kind of doing a 2-week evangelism thing here. Yeah. So that's the sum of it. That's what evangelism is. So I got news for you. If you are a Christian and you believe in sharing the gospel, you are an evangelical Christian. All right? And so that's why I find that label very easy to attach to myself, because that's what the word means. So I want to shift focus here a little bit. Let's talk more practical aspect of it. Okay, that's what we're supposed to do. How do we go about doing that? And I'm going to turn to Mary Lou here first, because you have been on the evangelism team more than anybody else, longer than anybody else that's been on the team. And so I'd be very interested in your thoughts about the history and how the team came about. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys both knew this, but was PR always attached to evangelism here at Trinity?
Not always. I can't remember when it started. I know the first time I was on the evangelism team, it was the evangelism PR team. In fact, Rick Grant was one of our co-directors then. I'm not sure when it became that, but lately it seems like the last few years, PR has kind of gotten forgotten a little bit as far as the title, and we're more known as the evangelism team. So, but
yeah, in our PR, because there's some overlap there, isn't there, Ben, between public relations and evangelism, in the sense that, part of what evangelism, I'm not going to say it's the sum total of it, obviously, but at least part of it has to be letting people know, reaching out to the people, letting them know that we're here. Sure. and what we got going on.
Yeah, and so sharing that either verbally or via social media or whatever, that there's that kind of overlap of PR. You have to get the word out, and what are we getting the word out about? The gospel. So again, there's that kind of overlap there.
So it just seemed like a natural fit to me. A lot of, be honest with you, a lot of my job on the PR evangelism team is the PR end, in the sense that I also oversee the social media accounts. And so, whether it's creating a Facebook event, there's a lot of good ways nowadays, if you're familiar with social media, to utilize it for the public relations aspect of your church. Like I said, we create Facebook events for anything from our Bible studies, not just like Well, the spaghetti dinner, which I think Mary Lou's going to advocate that we restart the spaghetti dinner based on our conversation before we went on the air today, right?
Yes.
So then we can create a Facebook event for a spaghetti dinner and bring people here. And I think that's what a lot of people think of is when they're talking about creating these events on Facebook. And for those of you that don't know, Facebook allows you within your page to create a specific event with a date, time, and everything, and then you can publish it on your page. But you can also send out invitations to people on Facebook so they'll actually get a notification in their inbox on Facebook that says, hey, so-and-so just invited you to this event. So you're not relying upon them to actually be happening to be on Facebook at the right time to have seen it pop up on your page. They'll get a notification. So that more guarantees the word gets out more effectively. But in addition to specific events like that, we use them for things like, sermon series. We got a sermon series coming up. Bible studies. We've got a big Welcome Home church-wide study we got coming up, which we created a Facebook event. It's one way to let people know about it. Although
that study and the series are also geared toward evangelism,
Yeah.
toward equiping our congregation. I'm sorry to
No, go ahead,
cut you
go
off,
ahead.
but that's another misconception is that, well, evangelism is the job of the evangelism team or the evangelism board, but really evangelism
shaking her head. All right, no, it's not. Right?
Every Christian, if you believe, in sharing the gospel, then you are called to evangelize, and that's what we want to put out there is that, equipping all of the disciples, all of the saints to be sharing the gospel and we'll share some practical advice on how to do that. But it's not just the job of your evangelism team, although we kind of direct it and head some stuff up in more of an organized way.
The interesting thing is that way back in my quite a few years ago, I used to be children's ministry director, and the children are better evangelism people than we are as adults. It's amazing how many children are more willing to bring guests to church. Every week we would have a lot of kids bringing a friend from the neighborhood or whatever. And that's a great thing. We need to look at our kids to actually learn about, okay, how do we do this? Because they do it naturally. They don't have to be taught how to do it.
Yeah.
They just do it.
Well, I think that's obviously at Trinity, we're a reasonably large church, so we have, teams, and no matter what the size of your church is, you're going to have some kind of evangelism ministry. And I think the lesson here is the goal of your evangelism ministry, the focus of your evangelism ministry should be on equipping the congregation, equipping the people, not to do it for them, And in smaller churches where it's pretty much the pastors overseeing all of this stuff, that's a leading misconception I think out there. People think it's the pastor's job to go out and preach the gospel to the community. No, it's your job to do that. It's the pastor's job, or in our case, our committee's, our team's job to help equip people to do that. So let's talk a little bit about some ways that we do that here that, people might not think of. They think of evangelism just, talking to the person sitting next to them, which it is, but there's other ways. And I want to talk about one unique way before we run out of time that we do. And this is Mary Lou's time to shine. One of the things we do here is what's called Sidewalk Sunday School. Tell us a little bit about that, Mary Lou.
Well, Sidewalk Sunday School is an outreach program to one of our local communities. And we go in once a week. Another pastor and I go in, and he actually runs the show. I call him the Pied Piper because when we can't come, the kids are literally devastated because they just loved Pastor Ed. He's a wonderful gentleman, and he has a way of speaking to them that they understand. And it's held in a community center of an apartment complex called the Village of Lakeview. And we've been there for about 11 and a half years. And it's just been a wonderful experience. It's my passion. I could speak to you for hours on Sidewalk Sunday
Remember, we're trying to
School
shorten the show,
kids.
though, Mary Lou.
But
what is it? What happens at Sidewalk Sunday School?
Well, we have a regular program. It lasts for about 40 minutes. It's kind of like Sunday school, except it's done on a Thursday night. And he has a Bible lesson. We sing songs, and we play a game to kind of get their energy level down a little bit so they'll sit and listen to him. And and it's just a wonderful program, and the kids love it. He actually invites that, picks some of them out, and they act out the story that he's trying to teach. And he might even do some stories 3 or 4 times in a year, and the kids remind him. I mean, they know. Like the Good Samaritan is one of his favorites, and I can't tell you how many times that he's done that. And the kids, I want to be, and they're all volunteering for what part they want to play.
Mhm.
And but it's not only do we do the program for the kids, okay, but we also want to help that community. And so, I mean, just recently we finished a program where we were collecting paper products because the children that are part of Sidewalk Sunday School are part of a bigger program called Homework Club, where the kids from Monday through Friday, they come there right after school and they work on their homework and get it done. And there are adults there, adult volunteers that help them with that. Well, they get a meal Monday through Thursday. They get a hot meal for dinner. And some of those kids, that's the hot meal that they're going to get, because if they went home, they might be lucky to get a bologna sandwich, because of so many of the kids are part of single parent homes, and mom might have to work. She might not be there to give them that hot meal. So the way that we help that community to do that is to provide the paper products. And this congregation loves Sidewalk Sunday School, and they're always so willing to donate whatever I ask for. And for the last 3 years, we've done this, and we've gotten enough paper products each year for their whole school year.
And I'm glad you hit on that homework club, because one of the things I was thinking that people who aren't familiar with the program, or maybe there's somebody in California watching this, I'm going to pick on California today apparently, and they say, oh, that sounds like a neat idea. Maybe I'd love to reach out to the local community. And I can see the question arising, well, but how do I get the kids there? This homework club, this is something that there was already going on there? Is that what it was?
Right. The community center sponsors this, what they call homework club. And 11 and a half years ago, Pastor Ed and I decided that we were going to do this. This was a ministry that we wanted to get started here as an outreach program for our church. And he already was doing Sidewalk Sunday Schools in the inner city. And so I went out and observed him doing one in the inner city. And I really liked his approach and how he did it. And so he said he would come and start a new Sidewalk Sunday School with us in Edgewood. And so we started to look for a place to do it. And, the good Lord walked with us, because we walked into the building. First building we went to, it had a community center, and we thought, well, that would be great. And we walked in, and the lady sitting behind the desk happened to be a person who had qualified for a Habitat house that Trinity Lutheran Church built. And she had 2 other church organizations that were in there doing a program. And so she opened her arms to us and said, we're here for you. And so that's how we got started.
I think that's an important thing to think about, is that if you're looking to start out something, whether it's this program or something else, sometimes you don't necessarily have to start from scratch. You can look for where the opportunities like this already exist that you might be able to, add on to. So Ben, let me ask you then, since you are our illustrious leader of our evangelism team, what else do we do other than Sidewalk Sunday School?
Well, as far as the evangelism team goes, I mean, there's a lot that the church does. We have our homeless shelter that we volunteer at. We have our food closet, which is a big ministry that helps. And, that's sort of a form of evangelism. People come and they need food, but we also share with them. And, it's part of that ministry of presence that we talk about a lot. But as far as the evangelism team goes, we have different outreach events that we try to organize and plan. We have a trunk or treat that we're trying to organize. We just had a worship in the park where we went to one of the local parks and brought our whole Saturday evening worship there. And it's great that some people even just walking by in the park can hear this crazy group of Christians just gathering in the middle of a park under a pavilion and singing praise and worship
And the
to God.
sun stayed out this year.
It was great weather, even though we did sing "Open Up the Heavens."
We blamed Ryan McAllister for that last year because he did "Open Up the Heavens" as one of the songs, and they did.
Poured down
but
right after
this
they
year
finished.
he was tempting fate. He put it back in the rotation again, but the sun stayed out, so we were happy. There's different. One thing I want to encourage, and something you just mentioned, Ben, you mentioned like some of these other programs like the Food Closet, and I think you mentioned earlier the Welcome Home study that we've got, which is in conjunction with the small groups coordinator. My lovely wife, Mary Kay, who's behind the camera right now, is our small groups coordinator here. Think holistically. Maybe that's a big bit of advice that I'd throw out there, is when you're doing all these ministries, and we're going to feature different types of ministries for the next 12 months, but at least one show per month. But when you're looking at it, don't look at evangelism as being compartmentalized, because lots of times it can work in conjunction with other things that you're doing. You agree?
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So, I mean, the classic point here is like we have a small groups ministry, and so we were kind of picking at my wife's ear as she and Lori Hinman were starting to look at what we want to do for the fall church-wide study. And we put in our vote, what was it, Mary Kay, back in like the spring sometime, didn't we? We said, hey, wouldn't it be great to do some kind of evangelism type oriented small group program, if I recall.
Yes, as I recall, that was back in, when we were ending the Pray Like This, which was the previous church-wide study.
We got our vote in early before anybody else does.
I don't think we were even done with Pray Like This before you guys were asking.
But that's the point. It's like sometimes, these things can work together. And like you're saying with the food ministry, it can also be an evangelistic opportunity there as well. Mm-hmm. So any closing thoughts, anything that we haven't talked about that you think specific examples or even about evangelism in general that you haven't shared today, do you think are important to share before we wrap up?
I think the point that you brought up was, think holistically. I think you're right. We tend to compartmentalize, and you think of evangelism as just, we all have this picture of evangelism in our head. We think of it as like this street preacher with a megaphone handing out tracts. And I mean, yeah, you can go out and talk to people one-on-one. That's a great way to evangelize, but it's so much more holistic than that. It's, again, I'm going to refer back to when we talk about the ministry of presence. Just wherever God has placed you, whatever your circle of influence, your sphere of influence is, whether it's at your office or whether it's at your school, you can be evangelizing by, the great quote from St. Francis of Assisi, preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words. You can be an example. That's the school. We have a school here at Trinity. That's their theme for the year, is set a godly example, based on the verse that says, "Do not let others look down on you because you're young, but set an example for the believers in faith and purity and conduct." So by being an example, by being the light of the world that Jesus called us to be, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So our works that we do, not that they're get us into heaven. We don't do good works as Christians because we think that we're going to earn some kind of credit with God. We do it because of what He's already done for us, and that's the great point of evangelism. Is we want to share that with others. We can't help but, we can't contain it. We can't help but to spread the love that God has first shown us.
Yeah, don't use it. It's not an excuse for not using words when the opportunity arises, but lots of times these other types of ministries, this ministry of presence, provides opportunities for conversations. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. There's an evangelism element to the service element, to the service in itself, because we are showing the love of Christ to people. But I found that often when you're doing that, it also opens the doors to discussions as well. So, any closing thoughts from you, Mary Lou?
Well, one of the things, we are the evangelism team, but that doesn't mean that the other teams aren't part of evangelism too.
Exactly.
Because you've already mentioned 2 or 3 things that other teams do that are really providing evangelism. And, like the Food Closet, that's evangelizing. And I think too many people think that, okay, well, evangelism, you're the one that has to come up with everything and how we're going to, spread the gospel. But it's not just us. Yes, that's our focus, but but it's also every team that's out there that's part of our church in some way to do it also.
I think that's going to be a theme we're going to see over each of these shows we do. About, like I said, it's going to be about one show per month, focusing on different ministry teams. And I think you're going to see as a theme throughout all of those is, there's overlap.
Yes.
With all of these things, there's overlap. You might have a team that's designed. This is, like you say, Mary Lou, your primary focus, but that doesn't mean that other teams aren't, overlapping with that as well. So
right. It's because the one thing that unifies us as Christians is the gospel, and evangelism's focus is sharing that. But each team has a stake in that. The gospel is why we do what we do, and so Pastor Jay, we're trying to make this our focus as an entire church for the year. Is focusing, going back to our roots, going back to the mission statement, is connecting with God, connecting with others. How is everything that we do? Look at it from that standpoint. How is this connecting people with God, and how is it connecting them with others?
excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, talking a little bit about evangelism today. Ben and I are going to talk more about it next week. And I got an idea, Ben, since we obviously color coordinated our outfits today.
Oh, yeah.
I say we wear the same clothes next week. What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds like a good plan. So, all right. Hey, do me a favor. If you did like this video, do me a favor. Go ahead and click the like button. It's a thumbs up button right here on the YouTube page. Also, normally at this point in time, I mentioned that we have a Facebook page, and I've always said it's the Trinity Talk Live Facebook page. That has changed. It is no longer Trinity Talk Live. We've renamed that page to Trinity Joppa Channel because of all the new shows we've got. We've got 7 regular programs airing on that channel. That Facebook page is now the Trinity Joppa Channel. It's going to feature announcements and things about all 7 shows that we have on the channel. So take a look at that. If you haven't given it a like, please give that a like as well. Please share this video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like I said, we got a lot of really exciting things coming we want you to be a part of. All right. Next week, as I said, we're going to be back with Ben Lander. We're going to talk about evangelism a little more, but next week's focus is going to be more narrow, just about the talking to people element of it. How do you go about becoming more comfortable speaking with people about your faith? All right. So thank you again, Mary Lou Roberts, for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And thank you, Ben Lander, for coming on the show. And thank you in advance for next week. Thank you all for watching. God bless.
In your word we will follow.